I never saw it coming. 3 years with Ella, and I thought I had it all figured out. We'd spent countless weekends hiking, camping, and living this authentic mountain life she loved to show off on Instagram. But everything came crashing down one Friday evening when she dropped the bomb. "I think we need to talk." Her eyes were already glazed over, like she'd rehearsed this in her head 1,000 times. I could feel the distance between us even before the words came out. "I don't think we're right for each other anymore," she said, her voice flat, almost too calm. "We want different things, and I think we're both holding on to something that's not there." I stared at her, dumbfounded. What the hell did that even mean? It wasn't like we had a massive fight or anything that would justify this. We'd been together for 3 years. We had plans. We talked about the future. I helped her with her blog, with the events she liked to pretend were real nature escapes. I was there for everything. And now, she was just done. "I think we should just be friends," she continued. "You know, friends with benefits. We can still hang out, but not like before. Just, no strings attached." It felt like a slap in the face. My mind went numb as I processed what she was saying. Friends with benefits. After everything. She was ready to just rewrite the whole history of us as if it meant nothing. All those nights, all the plans we made, and she was offering me this. It made my blood boil. "Are you serious?" I asked, my voice tight. "After 3 years, this is what you want? You want to reduce it all to just casual?" Ella didn't even blink. She looked almost bored, like this was the easiest thing in the world. "I just think we're better off this way. No commitment, just fun." Fun? Was she out of her mind? This wasn't fun. It was cruel. I stood up, pacing the living room. The walls felt like they were closing in on me. Everything I thought we were building, everything we had, was suddenly irrelevant to her. "No," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'm not doing that. I'm not going to be your fallback option. I deserve more than that." Ella just shrugged. "Okay. But don't get all dramatic. It doesn't have to be a big deal. I think we can both move on without any hard feelings." Move on. Hard feelings. I could barely breathe. I wanted to scream, but all I could do was shake my head. "I'm done," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "Done?" I grabbed my phone, blocking her number right then and there, feeling a strange sense of relief wash over me as the notifications from her started to disappear. No more texts. No more calls. No more pretending that we could ever go back to what we were. I went no contact. I was done with the lies, the manipulation, the empty promises of something authentic. There was no more time for that. The next few days were a blur. I threw myself into my work, focusing on my survival courses and the clients who actually respected me. But there was something else too. As I let go of the relationship with Ella, I started realizing there was something more to this. I didn't just want to move on from her, I needed to move on. It wasn't until a few weeks later when Harper, Ella's older sister, reached out that I even considered the idea of dating again. Harper had always been kind to me, always supportive when I was with Ella. We'd shared a couple of casual conversations at family gatherings, but nothing more. Now, she was reaching out to check in, offering her condolences about the breakup. I hadn't expected to hear from her, but I was glad she reached out. "I'm sorry about everything with Ella," she said over the phone. "She can be, well, you know how she is. But I know you're better off without her." That was all I needed to hear. The conversation flowed easily, and before I knew it, we were talking about everything from my work to the outdoors to our shared appreciation for real, unfiltered experiences. It felt natural, like we'd known each other longer than we had. Harper was grounded, unlike her sister, and for the first time in a while, I felt like I could talk to someone who understood me. By the time we ended the conversation, I realized something. Harper wasn't like Ella at all. She didn't want to sell me an illusion or tell me what I should want. She listened, she understood, and she didn't pretend to be something she wasn't. Maybe I was finally starting to see what I needed after all. I spent the next few weeks doing what I should have done all along, cutting out the noise. I deleted everything that had to do with Ella, her texts, her social media, the damn photos she posted of us, pretending to be the perfect couple. It was like I was drowning in her image of us, and the only way to breathe again was to shut it all out. I needed clarity, and that meant no distractions. I threw myself into my work. I ran my wilderness survival courses like I'd never done before. Every weekend, I taught city folks how to light fires from scratch, how to build shelters with nothing but their hands and their knowledge. It wasn't glamorous, it wasn't about impressing anyone, it was raw, it was real. I felt alive when I was out there, teaching people how to survive on their own terms. It was the opposite of everything Ella had ever represented. In between courses, I found myself texting Harper. At first, it was casual checking in to see how her day was going, talking about our shared love for the outdoors. But those conversations started to stretch longer. We talked about life, about our work, about the things that really mattered. Harper didn't have the same fake, polished vibe Ella did. She wasn't trying to impress me. She wasn't trying to sell me a dream. She just was. I didn't expect it, but the more we talked, the more I realized that Harper was different. She was smart, grounded, and honest in a way I hadn't felt in years. Ella had always played the role of the carefree influencer, but Harper had depth. She had purpose. She talked about her job as a wildlife specialist with such passion, and the way she cared for the animals, the way she respected nature, it was real. No fake photo shoots, no curated Instagram posts. Just raw, real work that mattered. One evening, we were chatting about her work with injured wildlife when she brought up an idea I hadn't considered before. "You know," Harper said, her voice sounding thoughtful over the phone, "I was thinking about doing a project. Maybe collaborating with your survival program, combining it with what I do. Something focused on teaching people real survival skills, like actual wilderness survival, with a focus on conservation. We could even create a program that incorporates wildlife rehabilitation." Her words hit me like a bolt of lightning. The idea was brilliant. It combined everything I cared about: teaching survival, living authentically, and preserving nature, and Harper's expertise. She could make it real. "I love that," I said, feeling a rush of excitement. It could be amazing. I mean, I already teach survival courses, but this would give it a whole new purpose. It wouldn't just be about surviving in the wild, it'd be about understanding the wild, and about giving back. Harper's voice lit up. "Exactly. It's more than just a weekend course. It's about making real connections with nature and with the world around us. Teaching people how to respect the land, how to help preserve it." We talked about it for hours. By the end of the conversation, we had a plan, something that could really make a difference. I'd always dreamed of doing something more with my survival program, but I never thought it could be this big, this impactful. But with Harper by my side, it felt possible. Real. After that night, things between us started to shift. We spent more time together, brainstorming ideas for the program. It was easy, natural. There was no pretense between us. It wasn't about impressing each other, it was about doing something meaningful. Something that aligned with our values. Harper didn't need the attention. She didn't care about the fame or the followers. She cared about the work, and it was impossible not to respect that. We started meeting more regularly. We'd go on long hikes, scouting out potential sites for the program, talking for hours about everything from conservation efforts to what we wanted to achieve with the project. It felt like a partnership, like something real, something that mattered. The more time I spent with Harper, the more I realized just how different she was from Ella. There was no drama with Harper, no manipulation, just honesty, and it felt good, so damn good. One night, after a long day of planning the new program, we sat on the porch of my cabin, watching the stars. Harper leaned back in her chair, her eyes on the sky, and for the first time in a long while, I felt like I was exactly where I needed to be. "You know," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper, "I'm glad we're doing this. I feel like it's something worth fighting for." I turned to her, my heart pounding. "Yeah, me too," I said, my voice steady. This is real. This is everything I've been looking for." And I realized in that moment, I wasn't just talking about the program. I was talking about us. When Harper invited me to her family reunion, I hesitated. The last time I'd seen her family, it had been at some awkward gathering where I'd tried to fit in with a group that was nothing like the world I was used to. Ella had always been the center of attention, and I was just the guy she dragged along. But Harper assured me that things would be different this time. She was right. The idea of spending time with her family felt like a breath of fresh air compared to the shallow, performative life I'd left behind with Ella. Still, I wasn't ready to face Ella. The thought of seeing her again after everything that happened made my stomach tighten. I knew she'd be there, she always was. Harper's family gatherings were huge, with everyone from cousins to distant relatives cramming into her parents' house for a full day of grilling, stories, and family games. It was about as far from the curated world of Instagram as you could get, and that was part of the reason I was looking forward to it. But the other part... Ela, don't worry about it, Harper said, her hand warm on mine as we drove up to her parents' house. It's going to be fine. We're family now. Her words should have comforted me, but they didn't. The thought of walking into that backyard, seeing Ella and all her friends, knowing what they must think of me, it made my pulse race. When we pulled up, I immediately spotted Ella standing near the bar, laughing with her friends. She was wearing one of those designer sundresses that cost more than my monthly rent, her hair perfectly styled. It was the same image she always projected, even here, surrounded by family. I couldn't help but feel a rush of resentment building up in me. This wasn't her world. This wasn't the life she was meant to have. But somehow she had made it her own, twisted it into something that worked for her. Harper said, squeezing my hand. I know it's a little. Well, but we're here. Let's just enjoy the day. I nodded, trying to shake off the dread that clung to my chest. Harper was already waving at her parents, her smile wide and genuine. She was comfortable here. This was her world, real, down to earth, and without the pretenses I'd gotten so used to. But me, I wasn't sure where I fit. We walked into the backyard, and immediately, I was hit with the noise, laughter, chatter, the clink of glasses, the smell of food on the grill. It was everything I needed. Real people, enjoying each other's company without the masks that so many others wore. Harper's mom came over first, pulling me into a tight hug. She smelled like fresh herbs and clean linen, and there was something so soothing about the way she made me feel like I was part of something. No pressure, just family. Ethan, I'm so glad you could make it, she said, her voice warm. Harper's told us all about your work. It's so impressive. I couldn't help but smile, the compliments genuine, not forced or out of obligation. It felt good, and it only got better from there. Her parents, her uncles and aunts, even the kids, they were all so easy to talk to, so welcoming. It didn't take long before I felt like I belonged in a way I never had with Ella's family. They didn't care about follower counts or Instagram validation. They just cared about real conversation, about who you were when you weren't trying to sell an image. But then I saw Ella. She had noticed me walking in, and her reaction was immediate. The shock on her face was enough to make me want to laugh. But instead, I just stood still, unsure of what to do. Harper didn't seem to notice, too busy chatting with her cousin about something I wasn't paying attention to. But Ella, she was staring right at me, her eyes wide, her lips pressed into a thin line. For a moment, I thought she might walk over, but instead, she turned sharply, muttering something to her friends. I saw the faintest flicker of anger in her eyes, something I hadn't seen in a long time. It was like I was some kind of inconvenient reminder of a past she was trying to bury. But then, as if by some unspoken rule, her mask slipped back into place. She smiled, waved at a few people, and pretended everything was fine. I tried to focus on the conversations around me, but my eyes kept drifting back to her. Her body language, the way she fidgeted with her drink, how she laughed just a little too loudly, it was all a performance. It wasn't real. And then, Harper caught me looking. Don't worry about her, she whispered, her voice low but calm. You're not here for her, you're here for us. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to ignore the tension that was creeping in at the edges of my mind. But I couldn't. Not when I could practically feel Ella's judgment from across the yard. Her quiet disdain seeping through the cracks of her fake smile. It didn't help that the longer we stayed, the more I saw her trying to orchestrate everything around her. She'd positioned herself near the center of the party, forcing all eyes on her, leaning into every conversation, flashing that perfect smile of hers. It was exhausting to watch, the way she demanded to be the center of attention, but I wasn't surprised. It was Ella, after all, always performing, always needing an audience. Eventually, I managed to pull my attention away, focusing on Harper, who was laughing with her family. She didn't need to prove anything to anyone. She didn't need to keep everyone's eyes on her. Harper was just herself. And it felt like the most authentic thing in the world. I realized that night that it wasn't just the family who accepted me, it was her. It was Harper. And that was everything. The afternoon unfolded in an awkward haze. At first, things seemed fine. Harper's family was warm, welcoming, and easy to talk to, but I couldn't ignore the growing tension. Ella's eyes kept flickering toward me, and every time she thought no one was looking, she shot me a glance filled with barely contained disdain. It didn't help that her friends were hovering around her, constantly reinforcing her image with forced laughter and meaningless small talk. It was like she was performing for an invisible audience that didn't exist in this space. I tried to shake it off, focusing on the conversations happening around me. The more I interacted with Harper's family, the more I realized how different they were from Ella's circle. These people didn't care about who had the most followers or who was wearing the most expensive clothes. They were real, grounded. Harper's mother was making jokes with one of her cousins about old family holidays, and even the kids joined in with no pretense. But then, as I was talking to Harper's uncle about his work in conservation, I saw it. Ella had moved to the center of the yard, positioning herself near the bar like she owned the place. She was laughing a little too loudly now, trying to command attention, but no one seemed to bite. They were too busy enjoying themselves, too engrossed in real conversations to care about the show she was putting on. And then, something shifted. I watched as Ella leaned in, whispering something to Brianna, her sidekick from the Meridian dinner. The one who had always looked at me like I was the poor, unlucky guy who didn't fit in with their perfect little world. The two of them exchanged a few words, and I could almost hear Ella's voice dripping with venom, though I couldn't make out the specifics. But I knew it was aimed at me. I tried to ignore it, but the tension in the air was palpable. The longer I stayed, the harder it became to pretend I didn't notice Ella's attempts to rile me up. Finally, she walked over. Her movements were deliberate, confident, like she was ready to put on another performance. She approached me with that fake, polite smile on her face, and I could already feel my pulse quicken. "Ethan," she said, the word cold, like a blade wrapped in silk. "You look good. How's life been treating you?" I could hear the false sweetness in her voice, the way she was trying to act like everything was fine, like there hadn't been a massive fallout between us. I clenched my jaw, trying to maintain control. "It's been fine," I replied evenly, keeping my tone neutral. "Busy with work?" She gave a little laugh, too loud, too forced. "I bet it's great out in the wilderness, away from all the real drama." The way she said real drama made me want to snap, but I kept myself in check. I wasn't about to let her drag me into another one of her public showdowns. Not today, not in front of Harper's family. "Yeah, it's peaceful," I said. "Real work, real people." Ella's smile faltered for just a second, but she quickly masked it, looking past me at Harper. I could see the wheels turning in her mind as she processed how to shift the situation. It was all a game to her, all about regaining control. "So, how's everything with Harper?" Ella asked, her voice dripping with insincerity. "I mean, it's so nice that you two are getting along." Harper had been standing nearby, talking to her mom, but she must have heard the subtle jab in Ella's voice, because she walked over, cutting off whatever response I was about to give. She placed a hand on my shoulder, and I could feel the immediate change in the energy. "We're good, Ella," Harper said coolly, her voice calm but firm. "How about you? Everything going well with your content?" Ella's smile faltered for a moment, but she quickly recovered, giving a tight laugh. "Oh, keeping busy." But I could see the cracks forming. The perfect image she tried so hard to maintain was beginning to crumble. Harper didn't flinch. She didn't back down or get defensive. She stood there, completely unbothered, and I could feel the weight of the unspoken words hanging between them. Harper didn't care about Ella's performance. She didn't need to. "You've been really good to him, Harper," Ella continued, her tone shifting slightly. "I hope you know what you're getting into." I glanced at Harper, who didn't even seem fazed. She gave Ella a smile that was sharp enough to cut through the tension in the air. "I know exactly what I'm getting into, Ella. More than you think." There was a long beat of silence. I could see the flush creeping up Ella's neck, the way her composure was starting to crack. She wasn't used to being confronted like this. She wasn't used to someone standing their ground, calling her out without hesitation. "Well," she said after a moment, her voice tight, "I'm glad you two are happy. That's all that matters, right?" Before I could respond, Harper's cousin walked up, eager to change the subject and distract us from the now awkward moment. Ella quickly excused herself, and as she walked away, I could feel the eyes of the family lingering on her. They'd seen the cracks, too, and for the first time in a long time, I felt relieved. Ella's manipulation and drama couldn't touch me anymore. Not here, not with Harper by my side. I realized, standing there in that backyard, that I was finally free of her. Free from the constant performance, the games, the control. I didn't need her, not anymore. The evening dragged on after Ella's little stunt. Her performance at the center of the party didn't fool anyone. Not really. People were polite, but the energy had shifted. Even her friends, the ones who always hovered around her like a cloud, seemed uncomfortable. Brianna kept glancing over at Harper and me, clearly trying to decide where to land in this new dynamic. But no one said anything, no one had to. I couldn't stop glancing at Ella, though. She had retreated back to her usual spot, hovering around the bar with her perfectly staged smile, but the cracks were visible. The once impenetrable mask of control had cracked, and her confidence seemed like it could shatter at any moment. I could tell she was rattled. There was no more of that effortless charm she usually exuded. Harper, however, was completely at ease. She didn't engage with Ella's antics. She didn't even acknowledge the snide comments that Ella threw her way every so often. It was like she was completely unaffected, and that made me admire her even more. Harper wasn't looking for validation, wasn't trying to impress anyone. She just was. She was comfortable in her own skin, something I hadn't realized I'd been missing until I saw it in her. As the night went on, I watched Ella try and fail to regain control of the situation. She was still making her rounds, still trying to make herself the center of attention, but her efforts were increasingly transparent. No one was buying it anymore. Not even her friends. Every time she turned to make a comment, the conversation would stall for a beat, and people would turn their focus elsewhere. It wasn't long before the family started to gravitate toward Harper and me. Conversations became easier, more relaxed. Harper's family was genuinely interested in what I did for a living, the survival courses I taught, the environmental projects I worked on. They asked questions, gave real feedback, and most importantly, listened. No one here was trying to one-up anyone else. It was about connection, not competition. It was the kind of conversation I'd always dreamed of having but never realized was possible. But of course, Ella couldn't stand being out of the spotlight for too long. After a while, she made her way over, trying to insert herself back into the group. She came up behind me, putting a hand on my shoulder as if she had every right to be there. "So, Ethan," she said, her voice thick with forced sweetness. "How's life in the wilderness? Still playing survivalist?" Her words were like a slap, but I kept my face neutral. The tension was palpable, but I wasn't about to give her the satisfaction of seeing me react. "Still teaching survival skills," I replied coolly, "helping people get in touch with what's real. You know what matters?" Ella raised an eyebrow. I'm sure. Must be so fulfilling living out there with all that dirt and no glamour." She was trying to provoke me, but I wasn't biting. "It is," I said, smiling at Harper, who was standing beside me. "You should try it sometime, Ella. It might teach you a thing or two about what really matters." Harper's smile was small but knowing, and I could see that she appreciated my restraint. Ella, on the other hand, wasn't quite sure what to make of the dig. She huffed and shifted her weight from one foot to the other, clearly rattled. "Right? Well, I'm sure it's just what you've always dreamed of," she said, her voice growing a little more defensive. "I mean, you always wanted to be out in the middle of nowhere, away from everything." I could see her trying to piece together a retort, but it was too late. Harper spoke up before she could finish. "You know, Ella," Harper said, her tone light but firm, "you should really try listening more and talking less. It might help you find some real connections." Just a thought, there it was. The calm, direct confrontation that Ella had been avoiding. Harper wasn't intimidated, wasn't backing down. And I realized then just how different she was from the person I'd spent the last 3 years with. Harper was direct, not out to hurt anyone, but unwilling to let anyone disrespect her or me. Ella's smile slipped. She turned sharply, her eyes flashing with that familiar mixture of anger and pride, and walked away, probably to retreat back into the bubble she'd created for herself. Her exit was swift, as if she couldn't handle the loss of control, but I didn't care. The damage had already been done. The truth had been laid bare, and Ella knew it. I could feel the weight lifting off my shoulders. The facade, the fake personess, everything that had once made me feel small, was no longer a part of my life. Not here, not now. Not with Harper. The rest of the evening passed without incident. Ella didn't make another attempt to start drama, at least not in front of us. And as the sun began to set and the family gathered around the fire pit, I felt a sense of peace settle in. For the first time in a long while, I wasn't trying to fit into a role that wasn't mine. I wasn't pretending to be something I wasn't, or bending to the will of someone else's expectations. I was exactly where I was supposed to be, and I knew, deep down, this was the beginning of something real. Something good. Something with Harper. The tension in the air that night was thick. Ella's performance at the reunion had already backfired, but I could tell she wasn't done. She wasn't one to let a slight go unanswered, especially not when it came to her carefully crafted image. As the evening wore on, I could see the wheels turning in her mind. She was plotting, ready to make her move, to regain some sense of control. I kept my distance, staying close to Harper, who was effortlessly moving through the evening with her family, chatting, laughing, and generally just enjoying herself. It was strange how easy it felt with her. No pretending, no pressure to be anyone I wasn't. But Ella, she was still fuming. Her eyes kept darting in our direction, and each time she saw me talking to someone, her jaw would tighten, her lips would form that thin, angry line. I didn't care. I had no time for her games anymore. The family gathered around the fire pit, the flickering light casting shadows over the yard. Harper squeezed my hand, her touch warm and reassuring, and for a moment everything felt perfect. But then, I saw her. Ella was moving toward us, slow and deliberate, her eyes locked onto mine with a look I couldn't quite place. Anger, frustration, a little bit of both. I didn't care. I wasn't going to let her ruin this moment. Harper noticed too, and I could feel the shift in her posture as she prepared for whatever Ella had planned. It didn't take long for Ella to reach us, her presence looming over the circle of people gathered around the fire. "You know," Ella began, her voice laced with venom, "I just can't believe how well you've all taken to this charade." She was talking to Harper, but her eyes were fixed on me. "Is this what you wanted, Harper? To steal someone's life, just because you couldn't make it on your own?" I could feel my blood boiling. Harper, on the other hand, didn't flinch. She looked straight at Ella, her gaze calm but sharp. "You're really still trying to turn this into something about you?" Harper asked, her voice measured, controlled. "You've made this whole situation about your ego, Ella. It's not about you anymore." Ella's face twisted. "Oh, I see. Now you're the perfect one, huh? The savior. Always playing the good girl. You think you know him better than I ever could. You don't." Harper didn't let the words rattle her. "I don't need to play any roles, Ella. I'm just here. And I'm just me. You've never understood that, have you?" The silence that followed felt thick, as if the whole world had paused. Even the crackling of the fire seemed to fade into the background. Ella's eyes darted between Harper and me, and I could see her calculating her next move. It was a sickening game to her. But Harper wasn't playing. Ella took a breath, then laughed, though it was harsh, forced. Like she was trying to convince herself more than anyone else. "You know, I thought you'd come crawling back eventually, Ethan. But I guess you've found a new way to make your life seem interesting." That was it. I couldn't stand it anymore. The arrogance, the entitlement, the constant manipulation. I stood up, not looking at Harper, but addressing Ella directly. "You don't get to decide what my life is, Ella," I said, my voice steady. "You don't get to dictate what happens after you walk away. This is my life. And I'm done playing the role you created for me." Her expression faltered, just for a second, before she tried to mask it with a smile. But it was hollow, forced. "You're still so naive, Ethan. You'll never be anything more than what I made you." I took a step forward, my heart pounding, but my words were calm. "No, I made myself. And I've learned that you're not worth fighting for." The words hung in the air for a moment, sharp and final. I could see it in her eyes, the realization that her grip on me had slipped, that she no longer had the power to control the narrative, and in that moment, I knew she knew it too. Harper stepped closer to me, her hand on my arm, steadying me. But I didn't need steadying. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was finally standing on solid ground. Ella, however, wasn't ready to admit defeat. She turned sharply, her heels clicking against the stone path as she walked away, muttering under her breath. I didn't hear the words, but I didn't need to. She was gone. Her game was over. I watched her disappear into the crowd, my chest heavy but lighter than had been in years. It was like the weight of her influence was finally lifting off me, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I had to watch my back. I was free. As I turned back to Harper, she smiled at me, her expression warm but unreadable, as though she understood everything that had just happened. "You okay?" she asked softly, her voice almost a whisper. "Yeah," I said, my own smile coming easily now. "I'm better than okay," and as the fire crackled behind us, I realized how much had changed in such a short time. I had left behind a life of fake smiles and hollow performances. And now, with Harper by my side, I was finally starting to build something real. Something that mattered. The night after Ella's little meltdown felt surreal. I had expected fireworks, some dramatic fallout, something to mark the end of the whole ordeal. But instead, there was nothing. The air was still, calm. I had confronted Ella, and for once, she didn't have the last word. She hadn't been able to twist the situation in her favor, and I was almost surprised by how peaceful that felt. Harper and I stayed at the reunion long after Ella had stormed off. I wasn't looking for sympathy, but I noticed the subtle shift in the way people looked at me. The coldness I'd once felt from Ella's circle had dissipated, replaced by a certain warmth from the family. No one had said anything directly, but I could tell the family was finally seeing the truth: Ella's manipulations, her lies, the way she turned everything into a performance. By the time the night wound down, I was exhausted but also strangely exhilarated. Harper and I made our way back to her car in the cool evening air, the weight of the confrontation still lingering but not in a bad way. It was like I had finally shed the last skin of my old life, and I felt free. As we drove away, I glanced over at Harper, who was focused on the road, her hands steady on the wheel. She looked calm, almost serene, but I could tell something had shifted for her too. "Are you okay?" I asked, breaking the silence. My voice sounded almost too loud in the car, but I had to ask. Harper glanced at me, her eyes softening. "Yeah," she said, smiling slightly. "I'm fine. Just, a little surprised by how that all played out." "You handled it really well," I said, my voice sincere. "Better than I would have. I don't think I could have stayed so calm." Harper shrugged. "I'm just tired of the drama. You're not the only one who's had to put up with her bullshit." She paused, her fingers tightening around the steering wheel. "But I think it's over now, right, for good." I nodded, leaning back in the seat. "Yeah. For good, it's over." We didn't speak much after that. The quiet in the car felt different now, comfortable. Harper and I didn't need to fill every moment with words. It was like there was an understanding between us. When we finally pulled up to her place, the night felt peaceful. Like the chaos of the reunion was something we'd left behind. I wasn't sure where things would go from here, but I was okay with it. I wasn't looking for answers or closure anymore. I had finally let go of everything Ella had tried to make me carry. Harper walked me to the door, her fingers brushing mine. "You sure you're okay?" she asked again, her voice soft. I smiled, feeling lighter than I had in years. "Yeah, I really am." We stood there for a moment, the night still around us. The only sounds the distant hum of traffic and the soft rustle of leaves in the breeze. Then, almost instinctively, I reached out and kissed her. It wasn't planned, it wasn't calculated, it was just something that felt right. Harper kissed me back, her lips soft and warm. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel the weight of everything that had happened. All I felt was the rightness of this moment, of where I was. When we finally pulled away, Harper smiled at me, her eyes bright. "I guess this is the part where we stop pretending, huh?" I chuckled. "Yeah, no more pretending." She nodded, taking a deep breath. "I'm glad." I kissed her again, and this time, there were no more doubts, no more questions. We were both moving forward, leaving behind everything that had been holding us back, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. As I walked inside, I knew one thing for sure: Ella was in the past, and I had no intention of looking back. The days after the reunion passed in a blur. Harper and I slipped easily into a new rhythm. It was like the world had shifted, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was in control of my own life. We spent weekends working on our environmental programs, brainstorming new ideas, and just being together. It was simple, but it was everything I needed. The weight of Ella's presence was gone, replaced by a quiet confidence that I hadn't known I was capable of until now. I stopped checking social media, stopped looking for updates on Ella's life. She no longer had any power over me, and it felt damn good. The only notifications I cared about were from Harper, and those made me smile every time. One evening, about a month after the reunion, Harper and I sat on the porch of my cabin, watching the sun dip below the horizon. It was a warm, peaceful evening, the kind I used to dream about when I was caught in the whirlwind of my relationship with Ella. "Things feel different now," I said, leaning back in the chair, glancing at Harper. She smiled, her eyes sparkling in the fading light. "Yeah. I think we've both had a pretty big shift. It wasn't just about moving past Ella. It was about rediscovering what mattered, what really mattered. I had spent so much time trying to please someone who didn't care about me, who only saw me as a tool to enhance her own image. Now, I was doing something real, something that had purpose. Harper's presence in my life had made all the difference. She didn't just understand the work I did, she respected it. And that respect was something I had never felt with Ella. We spent the next couple of months planning our next big project, a community program that would combine environmental education and wildlife rehabilitation. Harper had all the right connections, and I knew we had something special in the making. We worked tirelessly, sketching out ideas, contacting potential partners, and getting the word out. We were building something from the ground up, not for fame, not for followers, but for a cause we both believed in. The first real breakthrough came when we secured funding from a local environmental foundation. It was a small step, but it was huge for us. We celebrated with a quiet dinner at a local diner, the kind that served honest food and didn't try to impress anyone with unnecessary frills. It felt like a victory, but it also felt like the beginning of something bigger. "I can't believe we're doing this," Harper said, taking a sip of her coffee. "I'm so proud of us." "Me too," I said, leaning in. "This is just the start, Harper. We're building something real." As the weeks turned into months, our program began to gain traction. The community response was overwhelming. Schools, local organizations, even private donors started reaching out to get involved. It felt like we were on the verge of something incredible, and every small success pushed us forward. But Ella, she wasn't part of that world anymore. Her brand crumbled as quickly as it had built itself up. Her followers, once obsessed with her authentic mountain life, began to turn on her when they realized the truth behind her carefully curated images. People started questioning her motives, her relationships, her reality. Ella's perfect life was falling apart, and I couldn't help but feel a strange sense of satisfaction. She had been exposed, and the world wasn't buying it anymore. Then, one day, I received a message from a number I didn't recognize. At first, I thought it was spam, but when I opened it, I saw Ella's name. She was reaching out to apologize. Her message was full of guilt and regret, blaming her actions on everything but herself. She tried to make it sound like she had learned from her mistakes, but the words felt hollow. I didn't respond. Not because I didn't feel some strange sympathy for what she was going through, but because I knew that the past was where it belonged. It had nothing to do with the life I was building now. Weeks later, I heard through the grapevine that Ella had attempted to reach out to Harper as well, trying to explain herself. But Harper wasn't interested in hearing it. She didn't need to. The damage had been done, and the person Ella had tried to convince the world she was had been completely exposed. And then, finally, everything came together. Our first big event was a success, with families, schools, and environmental groups all coming together to participate in the program. We had created something lasting, something that had real impact. It felt like we were on the cusp of something even bigger. One evening, after the event had wrapped up, Harper and I stood on the edge of the forest behind the center, the last light of day fading into the sky. We were quiet for a moment, taking it all in. "I never thought it would be like this," Harper said, her voice filled with awe. I smiled, looking over at her. "Neither did I. But I'm glad it is." She turned to face me, her expression soft but certain. "We've built something real, something that matters, and we're just getting started." In that moment, I realized how far I had come, from the chaos of my past with Ella to this peaceful, grounded life I was building with Harper. We were doing something that mattered, and I knew, without a doubt, that this was the life I had been waiting for all along. We didn't need the world to see it. We didn't need anyone's approval. All that mattered was that we were here, together, making a real difference. And for the first time in years, I felt truly free. And as I stood there, side by side with Harper, I knew that everything was exactly where it should be.